Greetings from Seattle, Washington, in the great Pacific Northwest. I'm Jason Riggin, and you are listening to the Podcast of Mystery, the show that always leaves you with more questions than answers, the podcast where I talk with extraordinary guests about the paranormal, the strange, and the unknown. On this episode, I'll be talking with conspiracy theorist George Hobbs of the Fact Hunter podcast. It's a great conversation, but I'm sure it will upset some people. To be honest, some of the things George suggested upset me, but my role here isn't to argue with my guests or fact check them. My goal here is to listen. There's a great TED Talk from Julia Galef about mindsets. Specifically, she talks about the soldier mindset and the scout mindset. The soldier's mindset is to win. They see every conversation as an argument to be won. They seek out information to fortify their beliefs. For someone in the soldier mindset, finding out they are wrong means suffering a defeat. The scout's mindset is to gather information. They see conversations as a chance to learn. They seek out information that challenges their beliefs. For someone in the scout mindset, finding out they are wrong means they are making progress. I think too many of us live perpetually in the soldier mindset. I know I do. Previous incarnation of this show was very much like that. Originally, I was going to tell stories about the paranormal and then debunk them. I also developed a whole show about debunking conspiracy theories. But when I worked on these shows, I just never felt comfortable. I really struggled with this. I really liked the concept. I thought these projects were worthwhile and people were really encouraging about them, but I just really wasn't feeling it. Eventually, I decided that my discomfort with these shows was because they just weren't my style. Sure, I've got strong opinions and I frequently argue with people, but as a creator, as a content creator, the soldier mindset just isn't my style. I'm a scout, not a soldier. I think if you listen to my work, you will see that. This show isn't about converting people to my worldview. It isn't about winning an argument and proving I'm right. This show is about exploring the edges of our reality. It's about exploring the worldview of others. It's about challenging our pre-existing beliefs. This is a podcast of mystery. If you are looking for answers, this is the wrong show. Plenty of other shows have all the answers to everything. My goal is to leave you with more questions after listening to an episode, not less. I'm not here to debunk or fact check my guests. I'm here to have a conversation. It's up to you to decide what to believe and what to think. I'd also like to address the inevitable argument about platforming. Platforming and canceling are two sides of the same coin. Both are used to create this impression that something important and meaningful has been said. In reality, these terms are so vague and ambiguous that they have lost all meaning. Seriously, next time you hear someone complaining about folks getting canceled or being platformed, ask them what those terms mean, and you'll see what I'm talking about. With all that being said, I want to thank George for taking a chance and coming on this show. I want to thank him for sharing his thoughts and opinions. There are things he says in this episode that I strongly disagree with. I think he's factually incorrect about a number of things. I'm not endorsing his ideas by having him on my show any more than I am endorsing any of the ideas presented by any of my guests. So, I hope you enjoy this conversation. I hope it challenges you. I hope you learn something. George, if you're listening, you're welcome back on the show anytime.
Hey, Jason, first of all, thank you so much for having me on your show. Like I said, when we were talking offline, I got to listen to one of your podcasts today. You're doing a tremendous job, and I wish you nothing but success in the future. To all your listeners, thank you for the time to listen to us today. My name is George Hobbs. I live in Dover, Delaware, on the East Coast. I have a show called The Fact Hunter. We just recorded our 40th episode last night. I have done literally probably a couple hundred podcasts. I've done everything from music to comedy. And the truth, things that have happened over the last year, I've questioned myself on how life really works. So we developed, the show was originally called Conspiracy Theories Investigated. And as everything has happened over the last year, the term conspiracy theory is kind of taking a beating in the algorithms. So after talking to people who have done this a lot longer than me, they suggested, number one, it was too long of a title and it should be short, catchy. And there were some people on there that I wanted to bring on that didn't like that conspiracy theory moniker. So about, 10 episodes ago, we just kind of rebranded under The Fact Hunter. Truth be told, I wanted the show to be The Truth Hunter, but unfortunately, thetruthhunter.com would have costed me $1,400, whereas thefacthunter.com cost me $4.99. So The Fact Hunter it was. And you can check out our website there. We have a blog I write every couple days. We have a 24/7 streaming website that plays all of our podcasts on a roll. We have a chat room that people are very active in, and then we do have a forum where people can interact with different subjects with like-minded people. It's a wide variety of podcasts. A lot of it is historical. Like a big part of our show is we're in search of the true history. In your history books, it kind of tells one story, and then I guess as you grow older, you kind of start to see that things really aren't maybe just how they appear to be. And that's kind of what our show is, Jason.
Yeah, could you tell me a little bit about your motivations for starting this show? You talked a little bit about it, but, starting a podcast is not a small endeavor.
No, it's not. And here's the thing. I've got the person who I am today and the person who I was even just a couple years ago. I'm an extremely different person. And I think we all experience that change throughout our life. When you become a teenager, when you get into adulthood, and as you get older, you continually change. So I was in the Army for 25 years. I was originally in the Delaware National Guards. I spent 5 years there. I actually deployed with my father to Operation Desert Storm. I got out in 92, 93, and I had a break in service. And then I went active duty in 1995. So I spent 20 years in the Army. And in that time, I did 6 more deployments. I spent 51 months of my life in Iraq. And about my third tour, which was from November 10th, 2007 until February 13th, 2009, I spent 15 straight months in Baghdad. I missed 2 Thanksgivings, 2 Christmases in a row. And I'm not saying this to get, I don't want anybody to feel bad for me, but this is kind of where I'm going with it. During that tour, I started to get to what's really going on here, because even if you believe the official narrative of 9/11, which is 19 mostly Saudis who flew airplanes into 2 towers where 3 actually fell. I guess building 7 killed itself the same way Jeffrey Epstein did. And then, of course, you had the strike at the Pentagon. And, I'll get more into it later. But one thing I want to say now before I forget later, if you just go to YouTube and you enter Donald Rumsfeld, September 10th, you will see where he announced that the Department of Defense was missing $2.3 trillion. And the very next day, that you can say plane, you can say missile, or whatever it was that hit the Pentagon, just so happened to hit the accounting department. So lots of stuff going into there. But getting back to the reason why I do the podcast, just when you learn real history and how things are not what they seem, and the government seems to always take care of themselves, and what went down last year. And I just started to deep dive into these things. And when you really look through the weeds, I truly believe there is, I guess, the words they use, a shadow government. Some people call it, what's the word that everybody uses for the government, the shadow government?
I'm thinking of all the old names. I keep on wanting to say Illuminati. That's not where you're going.
Brain cramp here.
Okay,
but,
yes.
There is certainly, like a cabal, the deep state. The deep state is is the term that everybody uses. Some people say the cabal. But when you really deep dive and you see what's in our history book and what isn't, and the real reason why we allowed, and there's still so many people out there who don't understand that the president knew as early as November 15th, 1941, that Japan was going to attack Pearl Harbor. The same way they kind of knew that 9/11 was going to happen, the same way the FBI had been tracking the Pulse shooter, the same way. And listen, I don't want to say certain things on your show, but many of these large-scale events that you see on the news, there is a thing to MK Ultra. It's still very much going on. And I just think that we're being lied to. I think the TV, I think politics, and I think sports are used to divide us. If you see the movie, are you familiar, of course, with I think it's a Disney Pixar movie called A Bug's Life?
Yes.
Kevin Spacey is the head guy in charge there. And there's a very 30-second part of that movie where he says, if one person stands up, then everybody else is going to catch on. They're the 99%. And that's the thing that's kind of really frustrating for me is we really do get walked on. The middle, just over the last 12 months since March 11th of last year, when they started the lockdowns, you'll see the companies like the Amazons and the Walmarts have flourished and become they've grossly enhanced their pockets. And when you see middle America, for instance, my friend lives in Colorado Springs. I've lived there for 7 years while I was on active duty. I think 38% of small businesses went under over the last 12 months. So when you start to see the separation between the elites and the folks like me and you, the blue collars, the 99%, it's frustrating. And I'm trying to use this platform to tell everybody to wake up and listen. We all have ideas. We may lean to the right, we may lean to the left. But the two-party system, to me, this is just me speaking for myself, I think is a ruse. Personally, I don't think there's a difference between George Bush and Barack Obama. I think they are part of the club at the top. There's a very famous clip from George Carlin that says, "There's a club at the top and you ain't in it." And I personally believe in that very much.
And if I could take a brief kind of sidetrack, some people may be listening to this and may be frustrated that I'd have a conspiracy theory person on the show. But I really believe in free speech. I really believe in having an open dialogue. Would you mind talking about maybe your experiences or your thoughts about the value of free speech in this time?
Right. And that's funny. When I was talking to you earlier about that 15-month tour, I went up to my sergeant major and I looked at him. I said, "What are we doing here? I mean, what are we really doing here?" Like I said before, even if you believe the narrative of 9/11, Iraq was not involved. Neither was Afghanistan, by the way. But he told me, and like with a straight face from his heart, he told me to defend the Constitution, which obviously I didn't buy. But if we are defending the Constitution, what Constitution do we have? Just look over once again the last 12 months. Whether you're a religious person or not, it should bother you that the government, whether it's state, local, federal, shut down churches. And what people need to people will instantly say, but the coronavirus. We'll peel back that layer of the onion. In 2001, when those airplanes hit the Twin Towers and the Pentagon in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, what was the first thing they did? Well, they introduced the Patriot Act, which was written 6 months prior to 9/11 happening. And what did that do? Well, that took away more of your civil liberties. There's a reason we have the Fourth Amendment. There's a reason we have the Second Amendment. It's to protect ourselves from the government. And like I said, the government does a heck of a job to divide us amongst ourselves. They race bait, and we bite it every single time. And it's very frustrating how we, the 99%, can't come together. Even the last stimulus bill, for every person who got $1,400, 5,700. I guess if you, let me say it in reverse. For every American, it cost $5,700. You got $1,400. So imagine going to the bank, writing a check out to yourself for $5,700, and walking out of the bank for $1,400. Okay, and then if you go back to the stimulus prior to that, they had a 5,500 page document that they handed the Congress folks and the representatives, and they gave them 2 hours to go through it. This is because of all the pork and things like that they have stashed under us. And all this, they label us conspiracy theories. They made the movie Conspiracy Theory. They originally coined that term conspiracy theorist back in 1963 after the obvious Kennedy murder. And they're quick to use that term to make you seem to unauthenticate you, for lack of better words, right? Because as soon as they say, "Oh, he's a conspiracy theorist," you're discredited immediately. And that's how they do it. That's how they take your platform away from you.
Listening to your show, you've mentioned I believe the truth community several times. Would you mind kind of telling us what the truth community is?
So it's the most diverse community. And it's funny because, I mean, there's not one truth community. Some people believe in aliens. Okay. There's also some people who believe the whole alien theory is made up. Now, if the flat Earth thing has taken off tremendously, and by the way, if you haven't had David Weiss on your show, I really highly suggest that you ask him on because that will be your most viewed show ever because he has a huge following and he's very interesting and he makes a lot of sense. Um, and that's the beauty of the people in the truth community. You have to have an open mind because the problem is we as uh, Americans, we have become indoctrinated, right? When you grow up, you're told that there's an old guy who lives at the North Pole who wears a red suit and he rides reindeer and he delivers packages to everyone in 24 hours around the world, right? And you believe it until you're about 10 or 11. So what's the other thing that everybody always has in their crib, right? They have the little stars and the and the Earth and Saturn. What if all that was made up to make you believe there was a such thing as outer space? So they could have a corporation named NASA, so they could use that for monetary gains and maybe to do other things. A lot of people don't know that NASA is the leader in helium use in the world. They are the number one consumer of helium. It's very interesting. Now, that that day when I had David Weiss on my show was the day I really opened my eyes and thought, well, if just maybe the world isn't a ball spinning 1,000 miles an hour, racing through space, then what else maybe what have they lied about? And when you keep peeling back the onions, it can be eye opening.
So I don't want to sound paranoid myself, but we know that there are maybe government agencies and even just individuals that are trying to spread misinformation about stuff for their own gain. When you're trying to investigate this stuff, how do you weed through that, or is that even possible?
See, and that's you can do the same thing on any subject. The trials and tribulations of trying to determine whether or not flat Earth is real is the same thing of trying to figure out Pearl Harbor or Oklahoma City and all these other things, because when you research it, you're going to get 20, 30, 40 different accounts. So at some point, it's up to the individual to weed out what really makes sense and what doesn't make sense. And this is the problem where if you allow the government to impede with censorship and to take away your First Amendment, then we'll never know the truth because the truth will be whatever they put in the history books. But I've already learned, for instance, McGraw-Hill, they're one of the biggest textbooks producers in our country. If you look who owns that company, he was a known accomplice of Jeffrey Epstein. So he is one of the elite. So what's to say they're not putting this stuff in the history books to indoctrinate you? And my biggest, and I'm writing a book right now called Betrayed from Soldier to Truther. I'll throw that out there. It should come out next month. I dedicate an entire chapter to how how our education system was hijacked from us in 1979. The Constitution reads, here's the Constitution. If it's not listed, then it goes to Article 10, which is the state, right? Education is nowhere in the Constitution. So it should be a state, it should be a local, it should be a community thing. Well, David Rockefeller personally recruited Jimmy Carter to run for president. He started spending all this money to write articles in Time magazine, Life magazine. He paid media companies to glorify this guy, and he won the 1976 election. And the biggest mistake he made was he unconstitutionally enacted the Department of Education. Now, in order for a state to get its money from the federal government, they have, I think every state it's called different. Some states it's called a STAR test. There's different tests, your kids take in March or April, and they have to reach a certain plateau in order for the state to get its proper funding. So now states are teaching your kids how to pass a test instead of teaching them how to think independently, how to be critical thinkers. And that's a big problem I have. Education should be a community, it should be local, and it should be very much, like I said, endorsing critical thinking. Not you have to where the federal government dangles a carrot where you have to meet these requirements and then you'll get your funding. So that's a big pet peeve of mine.
So who do you think is behind these conspiracies?
Well, one thing I think most of us in the truth community can agree on is there are people in this world who make the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds look like everyday citizens. I think there are people at the very top whose name nobody knows. There are some people in the truth community, including David Icke. I don't know if you've ever heard of David Icke.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I mean, obviously, he thinks there are reptilians, hybrids that rule this earth. And, like I said, I'm extremely open minded and I don't doubt anything anymore. And you look at the elites and how long they live to be. I mean, you look at the Rockefellers and Rothschilds, some of these people live to be 104, 105 years old. Whereas you and I and the average Joes, if we hit 80, we're kicking it. We're doing really good. So is it a hybrid, or are they just able to eat the best food in the world, which gives them a longer life? I really think that there are secrets in our world. And I think there is knowledge in this world that is hidden from us.
Do you have, maybe this isn't the right term, but do you have any kind of favorite conspiracy theories that are kind of maybe more recent? I say favorite. I'm not sure what other word to kind of use.
Oh, yeah, that's so, I mean, 9/11 is a big one for me because number one, it affected me so much. But once again, when you get into the truth community, there's some people who think that it was CGI. And there's, if you go to fakeology.com, I think it is, there's a video. And folks, you got to remember, these airplanes are aluminum. Some people think in their head that these airplanes are solid steel. They're not. They're aluminum compound. You can tell this guy really slows it down. There's a CGI glitch where the nose actually comes through. So that's one theory. There's other theories. Are you familiar with Operation Northwoods?
No, but well, yes, I'm supposed to be because someone just talked to me about it yesterday, but I cannot remember it.
So during the Cuban Missile Crisis, and this is the thing, anytime, and this is on paper, it's documented, it's out there. And when these false flags happen, people refuse to believe it because people say, well, there's no way the government could do that. I'm here to tell you that these people at the top, the club that we are never be a part of, they don't think the same way we do. They really don't. I completely lost my train. Oh, Operation Northwoods. So obviously there was people who wanted to start a war with Cuba. So Operation Northwoods was all about simulating a plane getting shot down, an American plane getting shot down, and then having civilian casualties on the ground. It was the American, just like Operation Condor in South America, we were behind all these assassinations. So the American government backwards plans. The end result is, for instance, this is another huge favorite of mine, Muammar Gaddafi. Muammar Gaddafi was about to introduce an African dinar, which was mineral backed. Like the American dollar is fiat. There's nothing behind it. Back in the 1800s, you could take your dollar bill to the bank. They would give you a piece of silver in return for it. You give them a piece of silver, you get $1. I mean, that's how money should work. But we work on fiat money based on the credit worthiness of the United States of America. But the more they print, the less it becomes of value. So he wanted to not only have an African dinar, which would have crushed the English pound, the American dollar, he was going to make everybody around the world to buy his oil with that African dinar. And if you folks ever have time, I urge you to listen to, he did a speech in front of the United Nations in 2009, where he said that, and this is the really spooky part, he calls out the West. He didn't specifically call out America, but I think he said the West creates illnesses and viruses and then sells the vaccines for them. Because if you remember, 2009 was during the H1N1. So that was really, when I listened to it, it just blew me away. And then, of course, what happened after he did that, well, we started bombing him and we got him out of office. And now we have set that country back probably 2 generations. So if something is going to affect us or hurt the banks, you can look for that person to be overthrown. You can see Saddam Hussein, Muammar Gaddafi, on and on and on.
Now, a lot of people on the left would say that maybe these weren't conspiracies, maybe from like the deep state or the cabal, but really kind of the natural consequence of capitalism. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Well, man, that's a good point. I mean, I think there's a fine line between capitalism and imperialism, right? I mean, and this is another thing I talk about on my show a lot. I think we have two countries. I think we have one country where people hold up the Constitution and the flag and say, look, we're free. It says right here on the piece of paper. And then we have the country where we actually live in, where the people in the government pick and choose which rights we have. And that's a good point. But to kill another human being because of how you operate, that's hard for me to comprehend. And that's part of the reason why I'm in the truth community, because I invested so much personal time in a belief that I was doing the right thing. And I've lost friends. I've got two guys hanging up on my wall right here who were killed in combat, one in Iraq and one in Afghanistan. And my question is today, why did they really die for? And now, after spending the time in the truth community, I think it's for oil and opium. That's sure as hell what it seems like.
So when you're talking about these things, maybe to regular people meet face to face in real life, is that difficult talking about this stuff? Do you tell them what you believe, or do you try to hold it back?
Yeah, that's a great question, Jason. And that's something that comes up within our community all the time. It's funny, some people go after David Weiss for because he sells an app for $2.99, and they say, you're trying to get rich. Let me tell you something. If you want to be sure to lose the respect of your friends and family, just start spewing stuff from the truth community. They'll shut you down very quickly, and you'll lose respect from a lot of people. At the same time, if you really want to make a change in this world, sometimes you have to get outside of your comfort zone. And I'm not talking about doing drastic things. I'm talking about maybe standing out downtown and holding a sign in something you believe in, or saying things to family and friends, because for every 10 people who label you crazy or nuts, you might just wake up one person, and that one person, you might change that one person's life. And that doesn't even have to do with the truth community. It could be with anything you believe in or are passionate about. We're really bad in our society about worrying what someone thinks about you. We're trained that way. We're indoctrinated, because Facebook, when you put out a post, what do you want? You want likes, right? When you hit that tweet, you want likes. You want everybody to like what you say. And that mirrors itself in society to where we as individuals, and what made our country so beautiful was diversity, right? If everybody thought the same way, we would just have one line of food to pick from. We'd only have one line of clothes to pick from. We'd have one line of music to pick from, because people are afraid to really say what they think in many cases.
I'm going to ask a kind of a direct question, kind of aggressive. Hopefully this isn't too bad, but
Please do.
Do you think that there are certain politicians that kind of maybe leverage or cultivate, but don't really truly support the truth community? Does that make sense?
Well, I think every single leader, I think, like I said, the left wing and the right wing, they belong to the same bird. So I think most of them like to discredit the truth community. You see what happened to people who question a certain school in Connecticut, where they get lawsuits and they get shut down. And you see congressmen, there's a congresswoman, I forget, Marjorie Taylor Greene, maybe her name was. She had an ideal, she had a belief, and she stated it, which according to the Constitution was okay to do, right? That's the one side of the country we say we have. And then you see what happens. They wanted to censor her and all this other stuff. And listen, I say the same thing, I'm an independent, I'm right down the middle. I lean conservative, but I'm a registered independent, because I don't buy into the two-party system anymore. And I really think, I'm not trying to, I know there's a lot of passionate Trump people out there, but I really think if Trump wanted to make a difference, he would have ran it as an independent, but he's not. He ran as a Republican. It's just part of the ongoing divide and conquer between the 1% and the 99%. That's just my personal opinion.
Yeah, I suppose my question wasn't as direct as it was in my head, and that's what I was kind of thinking is these politicians that kind of maybe they dabble a little bit in this community, but they don't ever seem to deliver the goods.
Oh, for sure. Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, listen, when Trump took over in 2016, I mean, everybody thought that the Clintons were finally going to see justice, right? And then the whole uh, Podesta emails came out, and then everybody's like, finally, Julian Assange. And that's another thing I could talk about. I really felt one way about what's the guy who transitioned. He got locked up for spreading the WikiLeaks. Chelsea Manning. When I was in the military, I was like, that person's a traitor. Then about a year ago, I actually sat down and watched the video. The United States government murdered innocent people and two Reuters journalists. So when your government gets more upset at people exposing the truth than they do at the people who commit these acts, we have a real problem. So anyway, to fast forward back to your question, listen, when he walked off and he did not, Snowden and Assange, he did not pardon them after screaming fake news and all this for 4 years. I think that Trump lost a lot, at least the truth community who may have been on the right, he lost a lot of favor with them. I hope I answered your question.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. No, it's kind of a difficult question, without really calling people out. And I'm not really interested in doing that because, like, it becomes very
it becomes divisive,
temporary. It's like, well, it's also just a matter of like will be the news today. Like, there's these people kind of cycle in and out of the public eye, right? Even
sure.
Trump, right? He was the center of all of attention, and now he's another ex-president, right?
Yep.
Yeah. I have to ask about a couple classic conspiracy theories.
Please.
And I hope these terms don't offend you at all.
No, nothing offends me. Trust me.
Okay, good. Okay. Do you have any opinions on who actually killed JFK?
That's another great question. It was certainly, and a lot of people don't realize, George H.W. Bush, the one they call Poppy Bush, and they don't call him Poppy because he's a sweet old man. They call him that because he was king of the heroin trade. He was very young and in the CIA at that point. He was one of the men on the ground. He is the only person in this country who claims he didn't know where he was on November 22nd, 1963. So he had a hand in it. He was in Dallas that day. So it was part the New Orleans mob. It was part George H.W. Bush, and it was certainly, without a doubt, Lyndon B. Johnson. So the term patsy is basically another term for the fall guy. They used Lee Harvey Oswald as a patsy. He was part of the scheme. He was always meant to be the fall guy. And if you fast forward 32 years, they used the exact same playbook on Timothy McVeigh.
Another one that you kind of talked about earlier was the aliens issue. I know a lot of people are kind of very excited about this report that is supposed to be coming out. What do you think is behind this whole alien phenomenon?
Well, it's interesting. If you go back to the Reagan administration, Reagan did a speech. I want to say it's 1987, but don't quote me. But it was almost 3 years to the day when George H.W. Bush gave his infamous New World Order speech, which happened to be on September 11th, 1990. 11 years later, planes flew in. But back to Reagan. Very famous, and I won't be able to quote it verbatim, but he said, if there would be an event from forces from outside of our Earth that would bring us all together and bring harmony to the world. So he was alluding to, if aliens came, then we would all join hands in a one world government. And if you'll notice, every administration, there'll be one or two times where somebody will ask him about it and they'll be like, oh, I can't talk about it, and they'll keep it down. But then there'll be leaks, whether it be through the CIA, or whatever, just like recently. Like if you remember, probably last fall, maybe the summer, Trump was on Fox News. I think it was Maria Bartiromo or whoever. And she asked him, she actually said, what's the deal with the aliens? And he goes, oh, I can't talk about it. And he makes it so secretive. Well, if it's so secret, I mean, why? Why is the government, who we pay, who are supposed to represent us, why are they allowed to keep secrets from us? So I think, now listen, maybe there is. And if somebody can show me evidence, I mean, I'm open to anything right now. But many people think there's an operation, Project Bluebeam is also one of these Operation Northwood types deals. It's supposed to be a false flag. Many people think that the next big false flag is going to be an alien invasion. And if you don't think that people will buy off on it, I urge everybody to go back and listen to the October 30th, 1938 broadcast of Orson Welles' War of the Worlds. The phone lines melted that night. People were lock and loading their weapons across this country. And if you think about the technology we have, for instance, up in your neck of the woods, you guys had for your New Year's celebration, like those lasers and the CGI thing that they had going on there. Imagine what they could use to make Americans believe that aliens are here. And once again, I think my biggest conspiracy theory, another one is I do believe that there is a globalist agenda. I think they are trying to break down borders. I think the bankers are behind just about everything, the very, very elite bankers. I think they want a one world dollar, and they're doing a good job. They've broken down Europe. They've broken down the Balkans. And they're slowly breaking down borders. And I think their end goal is Agenda 2030, which very clearly states you own nothing and there's a global dollar, which is a digital dollar. And if you don't comply with certain things, they can simply turn your money stream off.
Another kind of a big conspiracy theory that I'd like to know what your opinion of is, we've heard about this one just for a while. What were your opinions about QAnon?
So I came across something very recently. That's interesting you asked me that. I think it all started with the Podesto email leaks. And I think for the first time in decades, we actually had a chance to put the elite, I don't know what term to use, but to put them in their place, or to see some people held liable for something they've done. And I think it was quickly hijacked. Some folks are you familiar with gematria?
No, what is that?
So gematria is a very numbers based. If you look at the Hebrews, the original Hebrew Bible, it says that the world was created with numbers and letters. It's really hard to describe gematria over like an audio broadcast, but there's numbers where, like for the folks at home, if you go to gematrinator.com, you can put in names, events, whatever, just type in a word and it'll give you numbers. Okay. A big number is 33. The Illuminati's number is 33. You have 33 vertebrae. But it turns out that I think either Bill or Gates comes out to 17. 17 is Q. A lot of people in the truth community think that Bill Gates hijacked this and has been throwing off people for the last 4 years, because things got really ridiculous last year. Like I think they said like October 17th, John F. Kennedy Jr. was supposed to come back to life and be the vice president of the United States. And people were buying off on that stuff. I truly think the stuff they came out initially, I think there's stuff to it. I don't know how much we're allowed to talk about this type of thing on your podcast. I don't want to get you in trouble.
Oh, we can go wherever you want.
Okay. All right, cool. So the whole adrenochrome thing, right? Getting back to these elitists who live forever and ever. Are you familiar with Marie Abramovich?
No, who is that?
Okay, so she is a very high up person in the Illuminati. She does spirit cooking. She was actually paid by Microsoft to make a very, very edgy commercial. She's a known Satanist, and Microsoft, Bill Gates, hired her to do a commercial in 2017. And people lost it and they pulled it very quickly, but you can still see that commercial on YouTube. But she's a known spirit cooker. And going through the Podesta emails, her name comes up all the time. And this is the other thing that bothers me in the truth community. I mean, we just shut down this country for a bad flu season, which is kind of weird because the report came out the other day that the flu cases were down 99% from last year. I think that's funny. But the truth be told, that 500,000 kids go missing every year from just the United States. And nobody bats an eye. It's acceptable. When have you ever heard somebody do a TV show talking about the 500,000 kids that go missing every year? And then there's things on record documented. Boys Town, Nebraska, from the late 80s, early 90s. We know these things happen. So what's really going on with these kids? Why were they so quick after the earthquake of 2010 to get the Clinton Foundation down there so quick? How many kids went missing from that? What is happening with all these kids? I really think there was something to it, and it got hijacked, and it was used to mislead people and to keep people from sitting on their hands. Because what was the big catchphrase they had? Something about it was like be patient, or I forget that they had a catchphrase they used to say all the time, but it just meant for people to wait for the next clue. And they would post this thing. If you look at 2017, this picture from this, and just the most erroneous things. But then there's also like Isaac Cappy. I mean, you could do a 4-hour show on what happened to that guy. I mean, you have a guy who was in a major motion picture. He was in Thor, and he's calling out Tom Hanks as a pedophile. And then he ends up dead. I mean, there's just so much to it. Epstein Island, Bill Gates, there's a gentleman by the name of George Webb, but he's an investigative reporter. He claims that Bill Gates hired Epstein to spray some diseases down in Africa. Like there's more. I'm telling each and every one of your listeners, I can promise you this. The correlation between Gates and Epstein goes way further than you can imagine. I believe it goes to transhumanism. It goes to breeding farms, and I mean, it goes very deep. There's a reason why, whether or not he's really dead or not, I don't know if we'll ever know that. But there's people who are still tracking his tail numbers, going back and forth from like Chile to Antarctica. It's a very, very deep hole. But unfortunately, once again, they put the kibosh on those words. So it's the algorithms within YouTube and podcasting. They can easily, they want to make people afraid to talk about it. And my thing is, if they're really crunching down on it, what are they hiding?
Are there any conspiracy theories that you kind of actively dislike, or you think are maybe dangerous?
I don't think there's a such thing as a dangerous conspiracy theory. I think as people, we need to be completely open-minded. And that's one thing, when I really embraced being a truther or a conspiracy theorist, however you want to call it, I understood that maybe I need to start listening to people I don't normally agree with, because you don't expand your mind just listening to like-minded people all the time. So I started going out of my comfort zone and listening to channels on YouTube or podcasts that I might not have listened to before. And even if I only take one thing away, then I learned something. So I don't have anything against conspiracy theories. One thing I really need to expand on is what you talk about, the paranormal. Maybe, there is. Now, here's the thing. What if there is life on this earth that we don't know about, right? If you think of the word extraterrestrial, okay? The word extra means more. Terra means land. So what if there is other land on this earth that we don't know about? And maybe those are the people who are controlling our day-to-day activities. If you guys look, the day of, I don't remember if it was the day of the election or the day Biden took office. What's his name? John Kerry. He flew to Antarctica. So, I mean, if you're a hollow earth believer, maybe he was reporting to the leaders down there. Or if there is extra terra, extra land, what if we do live on a flat, or maybe not a flat earth, but, what if there is more land past Antarctica that we don't know about? And for people to quickly dismiss everything like that, I just urge you, because with David Weiss, I got an email he asked me to come on my show. And as soon as I saw flat earth, I deleted. Well, I didn't delete the email. I just kept going. I'm like, what? Are you crazy? And then the next day or two, it started eating at me, because I reply to everybody. You got to be a decent person to everybody. And he happened to have a link in there. And I clicked on it, and I was like, okay, that makes sense. But what about this? Okay, that makes sense. So just if let me ask you this from me to you. Do you believe we went to the moon on July 20th, 1969?
I'm not sure about the date, but I do believe we went to the moon.
Okay, so you think we've been to the moon? Like for most people, I think it's 50-50. Maybe it's and have you seen the 40-minute documentary? It's called A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon.
Oh no, what is that?
So they have some film footage in there, a very famous film footage of the Earth from above, and it looks like they're way out there. But what it was it John Glenn? He was filming it. They had round holes in the capsule. He was filming it through the round hole to make the Earth look round. There's several cases where NASA say we've never been out of low atmosphere. Another problem with us going to the moon is, are you familiar with the Van Allen radiation belt?
I think I've heard of it before. I'm not sure what it is, though.
So about 400, 600 miles above the Earth, there's something called the Van Allen radiation belt. And if you look at the known technology we had back in 1969, what was used to go up to the moon, which is, I think they say it's like 238,000 miles away, they would have to go through the Van Allen radiation belt. And they're like, there's no way with what that capsule was made with, they could get through there alive. And on that video, a funny thing happened on the way to the moon. You can tell that they were still in low atmosphere when they were filming. They found some lost footage. And then in every other thing we have, like the internet, we've gone from 1G to 2G and we're on 5G now. NASA's on record of saying that they lost the technology to go to the moon. And that's a fact. That they said, how do you lose technology? As Americans, as a capitalist country, right? We don't lose something that's successful. So that's something I struggle with. And then I point out to people, if they did lie and they filmed all of that, in Hollywood or in the desert in Arizona, what is the greatest accomplishment man has ever done according to the history books? It's going to the moon, right? And if they could lie about that, then what else wouldn't they lie about? And one more nugget I'll throw about you, and this is one of the coolest conspiracy theories ever. Stanley Kubrick, which is the guy many people believe who filmed all that. The film, who filmed the whole moon landing and everything. There's a couple things you got to remember. Number one, we'll start with Gus Grissom. Gus Grissom was the guy that died in 1963 on the Apollo, maybe it was the Apollo 1, 2, or 3, something like that. A little known fact is he hung a lemon on that thing the day before they were training, and their communication wasn't working. And Gus Grissom said, how in the hell are we going to go to the moon if we can't talk from me to the building, which was like 50 yards away? And when he left that day, he took a lemon and he hung it on the capsule. Well, the next day is when the fire happened and him and the other two guys burned up and died. So they assigned an investigator. The investigator started finding out some things. That guy was killed a few days after he gave his testimony to Congress. His car, quote unquote, stopped on the car tracks, and the train hit him, and it killed himself and his wife and his daughter. So there was a massive cover up. Once again, you'll just hear in the history books, you'll see Gus Grissom died in a terrible accident. But you can look; it's not hidden. You just got to search it. That he had a very big problem with what was going on, and he died, and so did the investigator. And there's just so many anomalies that had happened with Stanley Kubrick. They say he filmed it. Well, if you look at Eyes Wide Shut, that movie is supposed to be based on a big party the Rothschilds had in 1972. But he left many clues to his movies. If you look at The Shining, the kid has a little rocket that says USA on it, looks like the Apollo 11. When he opens the closet, the shelf has Tang on the wall. And for those who are younger, you may not get it, but Tang was the big drink in the 70s and 80s that the astronauts used while they were in space. And these guys, quote unquote, were on the moon for 3 days. How did they go to the bathroom? I mean, the little things. When the rocket shot up, the little capsule when it went back up off the moon, who filmed that? And then when John Glenn was talking to President Nixon on the phone, how was there no delay with the technology they had in 1969? I remember talking to when my dad in 1986, He was in Germany. And I remember talking on a landline phone to my dad in Germany. There was like a 2-second delay. How was this guy talking to Nixon from 239,000 miles away, just instant, right? So at some point, I just urge people to peel back what you're told, because we are so indoctrinated at such a young age, and just start to use your eyes and believe what you see, believe what you hear. And sometimes the answer is right in front of you. There's a very famous saying, it's really hard. It's harder to show somebody the truth than it is to tell them they've been lied to.
Well, thank you so much for your time today. If people want to learn more about you and your show, where should they go?
They should go to thefacthunter.com, or they can check us out on all your favorite podcast sites. We're on Amazon. We're on iTunes. Our home is on Spreaker. If you're social media on Twitter, we are at The Fact Hunter. And if I could just close one more loop before I forget, getting back to Stanley Kubrick. So he signed the contract for complete control for the movie Eyes Wide Shut. So none of the executives saw anything. It was presented. They met in a hotel. I think it was a Sheraton, and the producers went in there. They watched the movie, and when they were done, they called Stanley Kubrick down. There was loud arguments, shouting. I mean, for 30 minutes. There's a guy who wrote a book about just that happening. He died that night, and 28 minutes are missing from the movie. And for people, and if you guys don't know, his biggest movie, most important movie, was 2001: A Space Odyssey. He died exactly 666 days before January 1st, 2001.
Pretty creepy.
Yes, it certainly is. And there's so many hints, like his movies. You can just even go on YouTube and put Stanley Kubrick movie clues, and it's really eerie. But I want to thank you for the opportunity to put my platform out there. I truly appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on. It's been a fascinating conversation. I really, really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much.
I'm Jason Rigdon, and you have been listening to episode number 19 of the Podcast of Mystery, originally transmitted on
Tuesday, June 22nd, 2021.
If you want more information about me, the show, or my guests, please visit podcastofmystery.com. If you have a guest or a topic that you would like to hear on this show, please email podofmystery@gmail.com. You can also send any feedback or comments to that same address. This audio program is presented by me, Jason Rigdon, in 2021, and is freely available under the Creative Commons Attribution License.